Hello everyone, you know what day it is? That's right, Final Four day. But there's always time to learn, so hopefully we'll look back on this video in the annals of history as a positive day, and our boys are playing in a championship Saturday. Until then, let's discuss ecology this morning. So, ecology, who's heard of it before? Notice the little tagline on there is, can you relate? So that's essentially what ecology is. It's the study of interactions in nature. Now those interactions can be between different organisms, predator-prey, plants, nature, the composers, things like that, or they can be between organisms and their environment, as in the effect humans have on climate or climate on other organisms. You've got beavers out there that can drastically change a stream ecology of an area. So it's also the study of ecosystems. So remember, ology means study of. So we're studying ecosystems. So we're looking at interactions, and we're looking at ecosystems in particular. An ecosystem consists of all the living and non-living parts of a certain area. So if you take a step back and you're going to examine any ecosystem in particular, you'll have living things in there. Notice the cattails, the fish, the little bacteria. You've got this turtle here, this dragonfly, decomposers. Those are all living parts of that ecosystem. Non-living parts of that ecosystem would be the sun itself, maybe the weather patterns of the day, the water, the soil, what type of gases are being exchanged between the water and the atmosphere. So that would be the non-living components of that ecosystem. So of course, being science, we have names for everything. So names for these are biotic and abiotic. So biotic factors are living things, their remains, and their waste. So you think of plants, animals, dead matter, maybe you're on a hike and you have to step over an old rotten log on the trail, or nitrogenous waste, which is, as the name implies, animal poo, which is pretty gross. There's also abiotic factors which do not come from living things. So that's the geography, topography of the land, the climate, the amount of water, presence of water, yay or nay, or the rocks themselves. So those are biotic and abiotic factors. So let's do a brief quiz. You've got an ecosystem here. This is something you might see, say, down at Bush Wildlife, down 94, something like that. So the biotic and abiotic factors present here. Number 3 on your notes, you kind of follow along. The deer, the water, the lily pads, carbon dioxide, sunlight, bacteria, turtle feces, and then mud and soil. So that one might be tricky. Depends on how you define either of those. But go through and try to answer the quiz questions yourself by looking at this, and whenever we go over these together, we'll discuss the correct answers. You just put an A or B by each one. So skipping ahead to number 4, we got nutrient cycles. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about this in live science, or maybe you can talk about the rock cycle before, things like that. But a cycle is just like we talked about with metabolism, with cell respiration and photosynthesis. A cycle here with nutrients are going to be how some abiotic factors get from one form to another, or from one place to another. So I know we've all heard of the water cycle with condensation, precipitation, runoff, transpiration, things like that. You've also got the carbon cycle, which is what we're going to talk about in a little more detail for the rest of the year, especially when it comes to climate change. And then the nitrogen cycle also plays an important role in our ecosystem. So let's talk about trophic levels. Trophic levels, right? All things start as producers. Producers are autotrophs, or things that make their own food. And after that, you get into consumers. Things that are also known as heterotrophs. They don't produce their own food. They have to consume something else. So because they don't make it themselves, they actually get less energy from that process than, say, a plant would by using energy from the sun. So you can see here the arrows follow along. Producers, they give energy to secondary or primary consumers, sorry. When those things are eaten, that's secondary consumers. Tertiary consumers, maybe in some cases a quaternary consumer. It depends on how many levels something goes through and depending on the food chain. But the last step, be it 5, 4, 3, or 6, whatever it is in that particular food chain, the last step is always going to be that of decomposers. So let's do some examples. All right, just mentioned decomposers like these mushrooms. In this case, they're breaking down, looks like wood chips or dead things in the soil. You've got this wildebeest here, say you're wildebeesting. All right, that's going to be a primary consumer because it eats producers, so energy flows from here to here. You've got this lion, which is going to eat the wildebeest, so it could be a secondary consumer. You've got these trees, they're producers because they're just using water, carbon dioxide, and energy from the sun to make their own energy through photosynthesis. Then you've got this human. depending on their environment, in this case, she's eating spaghetti, which is a plant, all right, because it's made from wheat. So, or who knows, whole grain, whatever she's into. But in this case, she's a primary consumer. But if she's in the savanna here, well, then she's going to be probably a primary, secondary consumer. She's going to be eaten. So she's also part of the food chain, depending on where she's at. So trophs and vores, I already kind of alluded to autotrophs and heterotrophs, producers and consumers. Well, consumers you could break that even further into herbivore, carnivore, or omnivore. A herbivore is something that eats plant matter. Think of like a cow or a giraffe or something like that. A carnivore is a meat eater, like a wolf, maybe a polar bear, humans at times. Well, that's probably not as accurate as I'd like it to be. Humans are more like omnivores. You could tell a lot about something by their odontology. In fact, there's a whole field of anthropology devoted to odontology. Paleoodontologists, what they do is they look at ancient teeth, and by looking at that and other things found in that same layer of rock, other fossils, they can sort of tell what type of lifestyle the animal lived. If you've got a lot of flat teeth, molars, odds are you ate a lot of plant matter. If you've got a lot of sharp teeth, like these, odds are you're a meat eater. If you've got both, like humans do, you're an omnivore. Decomposers, like we already said, are the last step in any chain. They're going to break things down. So these are both autotrophs. Got these trees from Madagascar, these corpse flowers. There's a couple right there in the botanical garden here in downtown St. Louis. You've got herbivores like this zebra. Remember we talked about zebra stripes. And that's an example of evolution, protects them from insect bites. You've got these carnivores, as you can obviously see, munching or chowing down on this wildebeest, things like that, okay? And then, as we've already talked about, a little shroom here is going to be a decomposer. So let's talk about trophic pyramids. The available energy going from primary or to secondary to tertiary, from producer to primary, the available energy decreases by 90% at each trophic level. That's why you're always going to see a lot more biodiversity at these lower areas of a food web or food pyramid or food chain than you will up top. Because down here, not only does it take less energy to sustain those organisms, there's also a lot more to go around. Whereas each of these things, as you go up a level, up a level, up a level, you'll notice it takes many producers to support a single tertiary consumer. Now, where's that energy lost to at each level? Well, it's lost to a variety of factors. Breathing, eating, reproducing, searching for mates, just survival in general, right? You lose lots of energy just in your everyday life, especially someone like me that's super energetic, right? So, go ahead and fill that in. It starts with 1,000 kilocalories for this particular example, but notice how it decreases by 90% each time. So only 10% moves on. Food chain, I'm sure we've heard of these before. I remember Miss McClar teaching me about them in 4th grade. But they show the one-way flow of energy from producer all the way up to apex predator. The apex being the top of the food chain. So here, energy from the sun. It's used for photosynthesis by these plants, these producers. This is your primary consumer because it eats the plant, so the energy flows this way. This thing is eaten by this frog, in this example, as the secondary consumer. Well, here the apex predator is this tertiary consumer. It's a hawk or something like that. So the energy decreases each step of that food chain. So this hawk has to eat a lot more frogs because there's a lot less energy he's getting or she's getting out of each meal. Well, this is only one possible pathway compared to a food web. That's a bunch of interconnected food chains. You start with this phytoplankton, goes to krill, squid, penguin, seal. Or maybe phytoplankton to krill, humpback whale. Or phytoplankton to krill, fish, penguin, killer whale. Who knows? Lots of possible food webs connected show a food chain. So the big thing we want you guys to realize here, if you either look at the one that's on your notes with the terrestrial food web or the one here, you've got what's known as keystone species. Everything is resulting, all the energy in this entire food chain, this whole ecosystem and this marine life comes from this phytoplankton and by way of the krill. So if you take out the krill, imagine you just get rid of this, that's going to affect everything else. But say you take out the squid. Well, that's going to hurt this emperor penguin because now they have less of a, I guess, source of energy, but at the same time, there's more krill to go around for these other things. So if you take out or add or remove a species, it has a ripple effect. There's greater ramifications than just, oh, there's not any more squid in that ecosystem. So that's what we're really going to talk about going forward next week when we get into climate change and invasive species and other things like that, is the Anthropocene, this whole new era, this next age where the humans, we're at the level now where we're having a major and significant impact on not only our climate, but our planet as a whole. All right, so that's where we'll pick up next week.